If you work in university maintenance, Granger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Granger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more. And all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRANGER, visit Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
I sold my car in Carvana last night.
Well, that's cool.
No, you don't understand. It went perfectly. Real offer, down to the penny. They're picking it up tomorrow. Nothing went wrong.
So, what's the problem?
That is the problem. Nothing in my life goes as smoothly. I'm waiting for the catch.
Maybe there's no catch.
That's exactly what a catch would want me to think.
Wow, you need to relax.
I need to knock on wood. Do we have wood? Is this table wood?
I think it's laminate.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's close enough.
Car selling without a catch. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or a repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in hate. We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about someone from history, Black history. At the time of this recording, it is Black History Month. And if you've been following along with the podcast, I said that, this month I was going to do something different in each podcast that I produced. It would be highlighting Black excellence in honor of Black History Month. And so on this particular podcast, what I'm going to do is talk about Black history, a figure in Black history, the one and only Malcolm X. Now, for some of you, you may not know a lot about Malcolm X. And for others, you may know a lot. And even for someone like me, surprisingly enough, I went a huge part of my life knowing very little about Malcolm X. Just to give you a little background, as many of you know, or maybe you don't know, I grew up in South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina. Went to predominantly Black middle schools, predominantly Black elementary school, predominantly Black high school. And one thing that was common when I was in school was, when they did recognize Black History Month, it seemed to me that the conversation always was around the same people, the same historic figures of, our history. Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Thurgood Marshall, any black figure in history, we heard about them, but, it wasn't like Frederick Douglass, can't forget him. And that's just to name a few. We heard about quite a few of them, and they would talk about them, and the conversations would be relatively brief. But I mean, Martin Luther King was, obviously the one that struck the biggest accord, and, people talked about, our teachers would talk about, what he did in history, and he, they'd play the I Have a Dream speech, and, they talk about, his place in history and what he did, and, what he wanted for black and brown people. And that was all fine and good. And, they always, Dr. King was assassinated on such and such, such and such. They just, it really covered over the fact that, Martin was, gunned down and killed, and his dealings with the CIA and the United States government. But that's another story for another day. However, again, black elementary school, black middle school, black high school, the one figure who never got talked about or was never mentioned was a guy by the name of Malcolm Little. Malcolm Little, who would later become Malcolm X, was someone that, public schools, if you will, tried to erase, at least where it was when I grew up in the 80s and, into the 90s. There was no talk about Malcolm X. The talk really came about Malcolm X when Spike Lee made his movie called X. And by that time, I think I was in college. I was in college by then. But nobody talked about Malcolm X. And I find it fascinating that looking back over my, elementary and middle school and high school years that, he never got mentioned. There was never any education about Malcolm X. And that kind of speaks to the larger concept of you really can't expect public schools to just be the only teachers of your children. If you expect public schools to teach your children only, then you've lost the race. You have to teach your children more as well. And so I grew up in a household with my parents, and my parents stayed together until I was like 13, and then they got divorced. But, my dad always and still has remained a constant in my life. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that he introduced me to Malcolm X and some of his teachings and his ideology. And, I kind of gravitated toward it. Malcolm X was, in a lot of ways, I've seen him being described as the American dream. He was the American dream, whether or not America wanted him to be the dream or not. And it's well documented. Malcolm overcame a drug addiction and a life of crime to become, one of the pioneers and one of our country's most forthright civil rights leader. I'm getting tongue tied here. Sorry. Forthright civil rights leaders. And he was definitely a champion and a champion of change for the 20th century. I think that goes without saying. Like I said, he turned from a life of crime. He was in prison in Massachusetts, I think, and he converted to Islam. He was doing a 6-year sentence for burglary in Massachusetts, and just I think 2 years after his release, from prison in 1952, he became a minister in the Nation of Islam in one of the temples in Boston. And from there, he moved to New York. But yeah, that's who Malcolm was. He was someone who came from nothing and became one of the most iconic figures of the civil rights movement. But when people think of civil rights movement, they always think of Dr. King, and rightfully so. But Malcolm X was that guy. And in 1957, Malcolm X founded the Nation of Islam's newspaper, Muhammad Speaks. Now, this paper, even to this day, remains one of the lasting legacies of Malcolm X. In that paper, he was able to spread his message, his philosophies on black pride, black unity, black beauty, black power. He was able to spread that widely across the country. And for a time in the 1960s, Muhammad Speaks was the most widely read black newspaper in the United States, period. It was circulating in, I think, the 100,000s. And that was saying a lot, given the fact of it was coming from Malcolm X. Because everybody didn't view him the same. Malcolm was often painted by the white media as someone who was a revolutionist, someone who is, a segregationist. He was anti-white. He really wasn't. He was just pro-black. He was about his people. And he never condoned any violence. He didn't, incite violence. He did not tell the people that followed him, hey, go fight and kill the white man. No, but what he wanted to do was, and it was in his message, was to take care of your own. And then if anyone stopped you from doing that, you had the right to defend yourself. And that's what he did. And that's what he preached.
Well, the Muslims who have accepted the religion of Islam and follow the religious guidance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad have never bombed any churches, have never murdered any little girls, as was done in Birmingham, have never lynched anybody, have never at any time been guilty of initiating any aggressive acts of violence during the entire 33 years or more that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been teaching us. The charge of violence against us actually stems from the guilt complex that exists in the conscious and subconscious minds of most white people in this country. They know that they've been violent in their brutality against Negroes. And they feel that someday the Negro is going to wake up and try and do unto them as they have do unto the whites as the whites have done unto us. We aren't a violent group. We are taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to obey the law, to respect everyone who respects us. We're taught to display courtesy, to be polite. But we're also taught that at any time anyone in any way inflicts or seeks to inflict violence upon us, we are within our religious rights to retaliate in self-defense to the maximum degree of our ability.
Malcolm's theories over the years really became a blueprint for the Black Power movements of the 60s and the 70s. I've read that he always got credit for cultivating the notion that, quote unquote, black is beautiful. Because it is. But from 1952 to 1965, in the time where he was actually murdered, it is speculated that the Nation of Islam's membership grew from 1,000 to 20,000. And by 1963, Malcolm had become the second most sought after speaker in the world. 1963, a black man, the second most sought after speaker in the world. Now, in 1964, Malcolm left the Nation of Islam. And after he left the Nation of Islam, if you're familiar with history, he changed his stance as far as how he viewed the world. I don't want to say his speech softened, because I don't think it softened, but I think it had a different message. There was a little bit more love for everybody. Wasn't any less hate, because I don't think Malcolm preached hate. But again, his philosophies on black pride, black beauty, black power, those are some of the ideals that trickled down to my father, and subsequently he gave them to me. And it wasn't until I read the autobiography of Malcolm X in 1991, so it's almost been 30 years. I was a freshman at South Carolina State University. That's when everything kind of seemed to take hold. But honestly, I had no idea that the book even existed. I knew who Malcolm X was, don't get me wrong. But again, my schools never taught me anything about Malcolm X. And as you all know, in 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated in New York City in the Audubon Ballroom, and he was only 39 years old. But Malcolm's legacy lived on. It lived on through his speeches, through his interviews, through his messages, through his paper. His legacy definitely lived on through the book that was written by Alex Haley, the autobiography of Malcolm X, again, which I read my freshman year in college. The paperback version of that book sold 400,000 copies in his first year. I mean, you couldn't keep it on the shelf. And I think, honestly, it is essential reading for any and every black person. I mean, you don't have to be black to read it, but I think it is very essential reading. It is something that, much like what my father did for me, I've introduced it to my sons. And I never tell them like, hey, you need to read this. You need to think like this. No, when you read something, that's the beauty of reading a passage. Everybody is subject to everyone else's interpretation. So what you take from Malcolm and what I take from Malcolm may be two different things. But no, I didn't see someone who hated somebody. I saw someone who had a tremendous amount of love and respect for not only himself, but his people. And as I mentioned, I think it was 1992 when Spike Lee's movie X came out, which was a adaptation of the autobiography. And when that movie came out, it reignited the ideas and the structure and the beliefs of Malcolm X. I remember going to the movies and seeing it. I went with my girlfriend, and I went to the midnight showing. Keep in mind, this movie is 3 hours long. And given the fact that I had read the book, I just remember sitting there watching the movie at midnight, and we didn't get out of it until like 3:00. And I was on the edge of my seat. Wasn't sleepy or anything. It was powerful. And since then, I've read the book twice again. He was a great American story, in my opinion. One of my favorite quotes from Malcolm, one of my all-time favorite quotes of all of the things that he said, and I quote, "If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything." Close quote. And honestly, that quote is just as relevant as it was back then as it is today. And so I often wonder, how is it that Malcolm wasn't recognized the way that he should have been when it comes to the leaders of this country and in the history of this country? Never gets mentioned. Why is that? How does that happen? In the civil rights movement, nonetheless. He and Dr. King didn't see eye to eye. I mean, that was pretty evident. They didn't hate each other. To my knowledge, they only met once. But the way that the media turned it was that, King preached peace and love, and Malcolm X preached hate. So even at that particular time in the 60s, you had a faction of the media that was looking to drive a wedge between these two black leaders. Again, both wanted the same thing, but they both went about different ways about trying to accomplish those particular goals for black folk. So ultimately, I am glad that my dad passed this on to me, because if I had depended on the school system in the state of South Carolina, which in the 12 years that I went to school always was in like 47th, 48th place in all of the states in the United States when it came to education. If I depended on my schools in the state of South Carolina to teach me about Malcolm X, I would have never learned anything about the man. But your education does not end when the school bell rings. Again, I have to thank my father for teaching me about him and introducing that to me. And I'm glad that I was able to pass that information along to my sons as well. Malcolm X is an important part of history. He is an important figure in history. And I just had to take a few minutes of my time in this podcast to share my thoughts on one Malcolm X. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, because from time to time this year, we will be dropping bonus coverage and bonus episodes on the podcast. Again, that's going to do it for me. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5Gs.
When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is the new Weight Watchers, built for real life and real results, no matter what mode you're in. Maddie went all in for her big day and lost 33 pounds. Emily lost 85 pounds and hit her goal while still living her life.
Weight Watchers gave me the tools and I feel amazing.
Join the millions of members and lose weight with the #1 doctor-recommended weight loss program. Lose more at WeightWatchers.com.
At 6 months, participants in a clinical trial of Weight Watchers program lost an average of 12 pounds.